You can know it. You can have a PhD in it. And you can still go, no, it can't be happening again. There's absolutely no way that this could be number 5 out of 5. Well, I'll just have a little bit of this and then I'll get out.
Were you under the assumption when you got into the relationship that relationships last because both couples put in equal energy and that makes it last? I'm really thinking that lately, that there's maybe for some relationships, there's actually a cycle to it that's driven by the pathological person than really actually what's happening between the two people in the context of the relationship.
Yeah, I think that your previous relationship history is going to really impact how you see those things, because if you've been with several pathological personalities, you're going to be quite familiar with the idea of a relationship cycle, aren't you? But in a kind of healthy relationship, there isn't really a cycle. There's kind of movement and progression and development and deepening, or even maybe stagnation. I'm not saying that every long-term relationship progresses and deepens, because many don't. But the cycle thing, I think, is in itself like a bit of a worry, isn't it?
It is. I got to thinking about that because when it came to Brad and my relationship, when we were in the beginning, we weren't very close. I mean, yeah, you get close because of infatuation and this sense of, oh my goodness, I'm in love with somebody. But when you really started the relationship, there was a period in which we had to grow together, that we didn't naturally think of each other, but we had to sort of learn to prioritize each other, learn what it meant to share life, share finances, share resources. And that was quite a bumpy curve for us. But the relationship, I kept seeing it kind of move through periods of increased intimacy as we came to grow safer and know each other and to rely on each other. But what I recognized in that pathological relationship was that I could feel that there was like a clock running that had nothing to do with me. It had to do more with where he was and how he was feeling versus where we were and how we were doing.
Yeah. And of course, if you don't have any of that insight at the time, you probably spend a lot of time thinking about what was creating what you could sense internally, but not really having the information about what's going on. Why does this keep happening? And then you apply your sort of normal thinking patterns to it, which of course don't work.
In fact, I realized that the reason we met when we met was because that was when he was typically looking for relationships. He even had windows of time that he was, let's say it crudely, hungrier for connection than other times. And it was those times that he tended to find people more actively in those windows. And I could see it over the 3 years that I knew him. We were married for 2, that there was that restlessness happened in that. It would be spring and into the summer. And then the fall, he would move into more of a guilty with contrition, feeling bad. He sort of make new vows to work harder that would last into the new year. And then as spring started to come, then there'd be this restlessness, dissatisfaction, and he'd cycle back into looking for more of something.
More of you, or more because there was other stuff going on?
More people, novelty, more relationships, more. He called it hunting. He started hunting more actively in those. I think he always was, but I think he was hunting more actively in those certain periods of time. But I could feel it. That was like governing the relation. Certainly left me feeling extremely unsafe.
Yeah, but it's such a good point, because I think it's difficult to admit this, but I think it's about kind of energy and resource, isn't it? I think these types of personalities have a genuine, I'm not saying it's legitimate, but it's a genuine need for the emotional energy that comes from attention and gratification and drama and all of that. And I think there's like a depletion that goes on. It's almost like it's just not something that they can seemingly help. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I agree. There's like this internal flatness or emptiness that seems restlessness that seems to create a lot of boredom and restlessness, and then they seem to need more energy. And it's interesting because I think, and I'd love to know what you think, I think this is tied into the degree that they overly rely on idealization as a way to perceive that they have this almost, it's not Pollyannish in the sense that it's believes in the good of everything, but it's as if they believe that the fairy tale, it's not Pollyanna, it's more of a fairy tale, as if a fairy tale exists out there and they're looking for it and they seemingly think other people have it and they're envious of it, so they go seeking for it.
Yeah.
They want the dream car and they want the dream life and the dream house and the right relationship, and they're supposed to be the right sexual experiences, and every holiday is supposed to be this incredible experience. It's this unrealistic idealization that seems to go on.
Yeah, it's incredibly immature because we all probably have a bit of that when we're younger, that sort of, oh, this is what falling in love is and this is what relationships are. And then you quite quickly learn that isn't real, and any decent relationship is not going to survive on that. But there's a phase of that which ideally we kind of grow out of. And I just feel like there's something about things very quickly getting boring. You can sense when they're getting bored. And one of the things that I found so destructive, I don't know if you sensed that too at the time, that when you can sense that kind of boredom pattern kicking in, that you're often kind of provoked. Obviously, you guys were married, so it's slightly different, but you're provoked into spotting it yourself. I was provoked into spotting it, reacting, stepping out because I could sense something was going wrong. And then, of course, essentially that was kind of giving him like a holiday, time off. Because he knew what he was like. He's bored. He needs a kind of pink ticket to kind of go out and do whatever. But I would kind of facilitate that by going, oh, I can sense you're being weird. You're finding fault a lot. You're being really difficult. I tell you what, this isn't working for me. And then I would withdraw, which is like an absolute chef's kiss, isn't it? Because then you get your freedom, but you also get to say, well, I didn't end it. She did. Then I would feel really guilty. And then, of course, when it all rolls back around again, the cycle starts again, that idealization thing starts again, because you get to go, right, we're back together. We got it wrong. We should never have split up. I think what's so difficult about figuring out cycles is that they have all the information of all the other lives and we don't always have it. What do we do when we don't have it?
Yeah. Or how about this part? When we don't even know the other lives exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know that I was being gaslit, and I didn't consider it gaslighting because I didn't know it was gaslighting, because I thought that he was telling me the truth.
Yeah, of course. Because you just think no one does that sort of thing.
No, I know. Nobody keeps, for example, images of broken. He worked on in a manufacturing setting, and they had machinery, and he would have broken machinery that needed to be fixed, and that he was recycling these as the excuse of why he's going to be home late for that night.
Okay.
And they weren't real. It didn't just happen. He just cycled through from another time.
So you're thinking he's out working, he's going to be late, but actually there's a whole load of stuff going on.
Exactly. And I had no clue that he's lying about that was actually the misleading, deliberate deception, and that it was just so that he could have a night to himself to do whatever he wanted to do.
Don't you think, though, that afterwards is when we do all that kind of putting the pieces together a bit? When it's all over and you kind of go, oh, hold on a minute. Now I see what was happening there. Now I get it. But at the time, not so much.
No. How it would happen for me, back to you'd have sort of like you'd step out and then that gave him a freedom. Or sort of, I call it get out of jail free card. That's what essentially. Yeah. But what happened for me is I would book a weekend away and thinking that we could rekindle our connection by just the two of us being off by ourselves doing something fun. So people who read the stories, like, you guys were traveling all the time. Yes, we were. Constantly. That was my effort to sort of recapture his interest in the relationship. Because every time I'd feel this restless, disappearing, low energy, or even worse, the contempt, it came out more like disgust, or like he was putting up with me. That's what I felt like. He was putting up with me. And then I would like, oh, we need to get away. We need to infuse this with something new and go somewhere.
Did you find that during those weekends away, it was actually worse?
No, they tended to be better, actually.
Okay.
That's why they were so reinforcing. Okay. Like, well, it worked, what do it again. But what was happening is I'm spending money we really actually didn't have, nor could we afford. And going away is exhausting. There's a lot of work to pack and unpack.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because... whatever level he knew what he was doing, when he got bored, he could kind of express enough dissatisfaction to get you working behind the scenes to sort of start and try and fix things or put more effort in or whatever.
Yeah. I remember when I met him and I heard the history of his relationship. So how it went roughly, and maybe I'm slightly wrong. I'm sure if he's listening, he's like, no, that's not correct. But the first marriage lasted roughly 2 years. The second marriage lasted 17. And I think there's reasons why. He was working on a green card with the United States. That's a big reason to stick something out. And they had a son together. He was very proud of that child. But they had a lot of breakups in that, really, a lot of big separations. I think they separated at least a minimum of 3 times in that period. So it was a very rocky relationship. And he worked hard. He was not home much. Next relationship, I think, lasted maybe 6 to 8 months, maybe 9. And it's because she found out, she caught him, and then just was done. And then the last relationship lasted 2 years. So in my head, I had a thing that said, this is going to be about 2 years long. If I could get past 2 years. And guess what? We were done at 2 years. It was over.
Wow.
Almost to the day.
Yeah, patterns. It's, I think, so much more important than, like you were saying at the beginning, individual behaviors. Once you start seeing patterns, it's usually really worth taking notice, because there shouldn't be really obvious repeating patterns in relationship. That's the whole point, isn't it? It is meant to be something that evolves and progresses. I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that's in part one of the reasons why a lot of these individuals don't have social media, not like genuine social media, like with their real friends and they don't tend to have somewhere where people can gather and start talking to each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, his relationships online was very bizarre. He had a family group text thing, and he was very frustrated with it. So he was in therapy the entire time we were together. In some ways, I think that definitely got weaponized, and it didn't make anything better. But I also think that there was some interesting observations. So one of them was that he felt like it was just frivolous conversation. It was so superficial and shallow that drove him nuts. He actually one time took the thread, cut everything out that was a meme, because they love to sub memes to each other, and there was almost nothing left. Hi, how are you? Good night. Hi, how are you? Good night. That was all. That was all that was left of that conversation thread, was that.
Just
and
memes.
he was mad about that. It's like, we don't talk to each other. But I'm thinking, but you don't want anyone to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But he was not on social media, not at all.
No.
But I think he was running so many double lives and scams, and that's how he got found out, by the way, was from my Facebook page. One of the girlfriends searched him, found him, and then contacted me.
Wow.
From my page.
I was listening to Peter Salerno early on today, which is such a fabulous book, Traumatic Cognitive Dissonance. And he was talking about the temptation that I definitely had to try and reach out to the new person, to try and say, like, to warn them. And it's so tempting to do it. But in that book, he's sort of saying, don't, not until you're well. You can't save anybody else until you're really well. And in fact, it sort of keeps you attached to the abuser in a sort of weird way. And I remember thinking, actually, this could be potentially quite a danger. You know, like, we've got to think about our well-being as well. But I think what's so difficult about tracking their patterns based on their history is the lack of reliable information, because you only know what you're told. And unless you're going to go and actually check that, which I think some people do now.
Yeah.
Is the background check thing an American, like, is that an American thing?
I think a lot of us do it. There's online services that you can use. I don't know if they exist in the UK.
I don't know either, to be fair. I think there's definitely a sort of police one that you can do if you think there's like a risk. But
if you know what county they're in, and that's not awfully hard to figure out, if you know where they live, you can then search what is the state and county. You can then go to the county. You need to know every place that they lived. You can go on and log into the court system and then run a check to see if there's been any filings against that individual. Then you'll find out if there's any criminal or civil cases that they've had, or in divorces as well.
And they don't get informed that you've done that. They would never know that.
It's public record. That's what's called public record. So it's public knowledge. So anything that's legally related is public knowledge here.
Okay. Pretty good.
Yeah, but there are PIs you can hire, and I did do that on this guy, by the way. I did hire somebody, but there is services, and the services to me are kind of iffy. how good they are. I'm not for sure. I think the information sometimes is old and not always up to, I just think it's always not always up to date. If they have phone numbers that they're using like voice over internet, VoIP services, then it doesn't really show up very well. They need to have a traditional cell phone plan or a traditional, nobody these days has landline anymore.
No.
So it gets really kind of challenging to do a big search on that. But here's the thing that I wondered is that I wonder if the other way we can spot the pattern is to get more familiar with what idealization feels like. I think we often confuse that. Let's kind of go back to the early part of the relationship when you first meet and you're falling in love and there's this big, lots of soupy feeling, neurotransmitters happening, dopamine, and there's a lot of oxytocin that's happening. There's just a lot of like really feel good feelings happening that makes us not very sane in that period of time. But it's easy, I think, to miscue idealization from that just feel-good experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because it's so powerful, we can have all of that kind of knowledge before we start something. But when you've actually begun it and you guys are getting close and there's physical intimacy and all of that, it's almost like no amount of telling yourself that in the moment is going to switch those feelings off. I think it's incredibly difficult. And I think it's also incredibly difficult when, if you've got the kind of personality, and not everybody does, but if you have the kind of personality that you tend to match someone else's energy rather than kind of go in with your full chest, as you know, the youngsters like to say, and you go in really out there yourself and kind of being pretty strong, you're tending to take the lead from somebody else and therefore sort of matching their pace rather than being really clear about setting it. It's almost like you have to sort of decide to set it before it really gets going. Do you know what I mean, Kerry?
I do. And I do tend to match people's energies and match their pacing, even when I'm unhappy with the pacing.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're right. That's very problematic. But the other thing that I realize as I look back is that, if I compare Brad to my second relationship, Brad didn't love bomb me. I was in love with him, crazy in love with him, but I didn't feel love bomb. I didn't feel like, he thought really well of me, but I definitely wasn't being idealized. And I don't think so. Whereas the second relationship, I felt sort of like I walked on water and I liked the feeling of it. And I never once said to myself, and it's interesting because I'd been trained clinically to be careful and observe that in the office with patients. And I even can notice it when it happens in social media, when there's this glowing, sort of this lots of lavish compliments and flattery happening. I end up thinking, ooh, this is idealization. They're putting me on a pedestal. Don't fall for this, because, I've learned way back in the day from one of my early teachers in the internship is that the nugget of gold, if all this flattery and praise, will turn into a piece of shit. So that's exactly how he phrased it. So he said, watch for that. If you're becoming the gold, the shit is following right behind it.
Absolutely. And you know that I really love Jungian psychology. And that's a kind of key idea, is that if there's all of this positivity, then there will be an equal amount of something of its inverse. Just maybe it's not being led with, it's being sort of hidden back there, But if there's a heavy, it's exactly what you just said, if there's a heavy amount of kind of leaning into how wonderful everything is, that's kind of excessive. But I think what you said just a second ago is even more important, which is that you can know it, you can have a PhD in it, and you can still go, well, no, I think I know enough about this stuff. I think I would know how to get out before it got too problematic. Or I'll just have a little bit of this and then I'll get out, like when it starts to become, do you know what I mean?
I know. There's just a dash of sugar in that coffee.
Just have a little indulgence.
Yeah.
And there's the other piece that definitely was for me about, it can't be another one. No, it can't be happening again. Like, no, nobody has that number of times in a row. Do you know that kind of gambler's fallacy of, there's absolutely no way that this could be number 5 out of 5. So you just won't allow it.
You're saying, I can't roll a good number again. Yeah. I just rolled a good number. So how could it be happening again?
Yeah, or a bad one.
A bad one in this case, yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a big thing. And there was one other thing I was thinking about as I was sort of preparing for this, which is, I don't know if the clients that you've worked with ever talked about this, but I think about this all the time, how no matter how many red flags are seen, we can still completely ignore them. And then say afterwards, I saw them, I definitely saw them. And I know I did that. I know I saw lots of red flags.
Oh, I even wrote about them. You can pick up
Yeah.
my book and read them. And,
Yeah.
and people were like, why are you doing that?
Exactly.
Well, because the idealization was so intoxicating, and
so
being chosen was so
intoxicating.
important to me. And I wanted to be in another relationship. And so I kept thinking, this is fixable. It's fixable. That's what I was doing. It's fixable. We'll just work on it.
Do you think you could be idealized again? Do you think what would happen if that happened again?
Well, I don't allow it, never allowed it in the office. I was able to sort of see it immediately and sidestep it, and then keep the treatment relationship on level ground. And so I knew that it was manipulation when it happened. That's what I would say. Oh, this person's manipulating me. What's going on that was creating this kind of insecurity that they feel they need to do this right now? Or be careful, something's happening with them. This says something to me about their psychology. I need to understand that and see this as a risk.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, and I would hear it. No, I don't think so.
Have you had like the chance, or has it kind of come up in your sort of thinking that actually there's this narrative about intensity, speed, idealization, kind of locking you down? But I also think there's a real danger with things that go incredibly slowly. And because of the internet and the way that abusers are learning that we're learning, and they definitely are kind of bright enough when it comes to what they want to hone their skills, I think that one of the ways that they're kind of getting around it is to slow everything down so much that you don't really get a chance to get to know them. Rather, there's so much time passing that by the time you actually spend enough time with them to see anything really significant, you're like a long time down the road. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but I haven't seen it personally because I'm not trying to meet anybody. But I can see that. I can see that because that's another way to be hidden, stay hidden.
Exactly. Because
Just like that, starting an argument with you is kind of a deal. This is now using time as a way to hide.
Exactly. And of course, if you've been in an abusive relationship and you go into one where things are going incredibly slowly, it's really logical to think, oh, this is wonderful. This is great. There's no pressure to spend loads of time together. There's no demands. There's no intensity, and you're going tick, 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 when in fact, that person knows that they can behave themselves for a couple of days at best. So things need to be spread out over a long period of time so that that kind of mask dropping can be as far enough in the future as possible.
Yes. Yeah. That makes, I'm not surprised because what I've seen is that they all tend to hone their skills. This is very much that they see it like an art of war, generally, and they just get better at the combating, the fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think you'd fall for the idealization again if you ever felt it? Do you think you'd recognize it?
I'd love to say no. I think I'd recognize it, but I think I did recognize it. Like we were saying, I think that's the trouble. It's not the recognizing it. It's the kind of, actually, it did happen again recently, but I had to have it pointed out by a girlfriend. So I got out before I got in, if you know what I mean. But if I'm really honest, it was only because I was saying to this girlfriend, oh no, but he's really nice. And I was giving her all of these things he was doing. And she went, no, 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 that is, and she just rattled off all the things that I wasn't seeing. And that was only 6 months ago.
Here's the part that I love, though. You were
Crazy.
listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even go on a date with this person, but I nearly did it again.
But you listened. And many of us are like, it feels so good, we won't listen.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't know about you. Well, I do know. Of course I know. We can't go through this again. It would It would kill me.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not. I don't want to do that either. In fact, so would I recognize it? And I said, yes, I think I would. I would really like it. It would feel great. I wouldn't want it to stop. But I think that I would be scared enough of it repeating that I would be reaching out and getting help.
Yeah. And you'd be on the phone to your girlfriends.
Yeah, to you and to other people that I really trust.
No. Absolutely. Because it's hard to see it, isn't it? It's really hard to see it.
It is hard to see.
Especially if you're which we can be, especially coming out of one of these things, you can be really bruised for a long time and then you start to want to live again. The idea that you've got to be that careful can feel really disheartening, and you just want to have a nice time, meet someone nice.
Here's why I don't like the example you just gave, you think that they're doing, because I think it plays into our vulnerability.
Mm.
And the vulnerability is that after we get out of one of these relationships, we're very risk averse. So we deliberately trust slower. We don't like fast moving relationships most of the time. We just are more vigilant and hesitant. And this plays into it. It looks like somebody who respects all of that instead of realizing they're weaponizing it.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like when I heard you say that. I was like, ooh, that's not good.
100%. And I only shared it because I think I've seen it happen. And it was a very powerful device for the very reasons that it plays into someone being really cautious and thinking they're being incredibly judicious, and they're not leading with their heart. They're not leading with desire. They're leading very much with their head and self-care. I think that's why it's so important that if you have a traumatic relationship history, you have to be the one setting the pace and setting the direction, not matching the pace and matching the direction.
I agree. So let's jump over to the podcast extra and talk about practically what does that look like? Because people may hear us say that and say, that sounds great, but I'm not for sure what you're actually advocating.
Sure.
So I'd love us to be able to talk about that.
Okay.